So my name is Lorraine McAnally, and I'm the Secretary of Dystonia Network of Australia, Inc., also called DNA for short. Today I'm interviewing Yasmina McGlone, a very interesting young woman and who also happens to have a form of dystonia. Welcome, Yasmina. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. So my name is Yasmina. I was born in France but raised in Scotland and now actually live in Australia. And a big passion of mine is I'm obsessed with para sport. So I have such a big love for everything, anything para sports and going to watch it and love being involved in community work and particularly working with kids with disabilities. And I also happen to be born with a condition called myoclonus dystonia.
Hmm.
So,
Tell us a little bit about that and how it affects you.
I first started showing symptoms when I was 3 years old. Actually, I have an older sister, and so my mum kind of knew to look out for it. But how it manifests for me is I get uncontrollable spasms and jerks. And for me, it can happen in every single muscle of my body. So from my vocal cords down to my legs. I think typically they say it doesn't impact legs, but for both me and my sister, we both have it impact our legs also. And there's also the element of it's one of for me, I've been someone that like fluctuates quite a lot. So what's going on externally in terms of like noise, sound, crowd, it can impact just how much my spasms increase.
Hmm.
And then also if I'm overly fatigued, then I can have so much spasms, but I'll sometimes get like the dystonia flares in my legs. So I've just learned it's a condition for me that's fluctuated over the years.
Hmm. And obviously, if your sister's got it, does it run backwards in the family too?
Yeah, so we found out so it's actually genetic. So we have a genetic form of dystonia, which I think it's the DYT11 gene. There's a specific gene
Mhm.
mutation that we have, which is what's caused the dystonia for us. So it works out that my dad's a carrier, and so there's me, my sister, and I also have a half sister that has the same condition. But before that, there doesn't seem to be any presence of it. So we've been the first one. So it actually took us, I didn't, the first time myoclonus dystonia got mentioned to me, I was 18 years old. So I mean, I actually lived my childhood without
Mm.
having any clue what was causing our movements. And I think that created a lot of challenges because wasn't able to understand my own body and work with my body. So it was
Mhm.
quite a confusing time growing up, especially starting school and looking at my peers and thinking I was so confused how they could control their body and I was unable to do the same. So those were confusing times.
Mm. Yes, definitely. Why do you think it was so long till you got the diagnosis?
So, but because I think what they said, like our condition kind of mimics a lot of other ones. And I think because it was me and my sister, they definitely knew there was a genetic component. But how it works is unless you know what specific gene you're looking for, it's hard to know, it was hard for them to know what it was. So at first, when it was just my sister was born, my mum said when she was a baby, she knew there was something going on because my sister she was sick quite a lot and struggled with walking.
Mm.
It's so, but then I think they thought there was like dyspraxia, there was a few different conditions. But then I came along and we had similar, but we presented quite differently. So I struggled a lot more trunk upwards, and I was good at being active, but not so good at being still. Whereas my sister's struggled more with her legs, was good at being still, but not so good at being active. And so we
Mm.
presented quite differently. And I think because the form of dystonia we have is a bit rarer, so it was just, we just got told every time we'd see different specialists as well that were interesting. And I think as well for years, sometimes we would get passed from neurologist to neurologist. So a lot of the times you were just starting from the beginning again.
Mm.
And it was more trying to yeah, a lot of the times maybe trying to understand the symptoms and the causes. So they were just, yeah, they just weren't too sure. And I think it was, yeah, I just remember being 18, I was a different neurologist, and he was the one that had suspected myoclonus dystonia. And when I looked up myoclonus dystonia, I was like, that sounds exactly like
Exactly
what
what
I
you had.
experienced. And it
Hmm.
was the first time to be able to have like a reference, because for years I thought it was like my own fault. I was like, I should be able to control my own body. If everybody else can, then
Mm.
I should be able to do the same. And so just having that diagnosis, it was it was really good to have something to be able to look up research and just be able to have more of an understanding of the way that my body was.
Mm. And how did you become involved in wheelchair AFL? That's an interesting sport.
Yeah, especially because it's an Australian, AFL is typically an Australian sport. But I was asked, so with growing up with myoclonus dystonia, I struggled a lot. In especially my school years, I didn't like being different at all. And when I'd finished school, I always thought I thought by the time I was an adult that I would have found something that would have took my movements away. And so when I finished school, I went through a bit of a darker period trying to struggle, and I struggled with self-acceptance. And then I moved to Australia to try and push myself out my comfort zone. And then I remember one year I was reflecting and realizing how much I'd held myself back in life and didn't do the things I wanted to because of this condition. So I started this little challenge where I would do something completely different. I was doing it with a friend. I think it was like every few weeks, and one of us would pick an activity that we'd never done before. And so I think it was like we were in the third or fourth week. I happened to just have a friend that played wheelchair football, and I went to watch him. And next thing they were like, "Do you want to come along and play?" And then because I don't use a wheelchair, day to day, I have
No.
my physical challenges, but I'm able to. Haven't often really needed to use a wheelchair, and so I was quite surprised. And when they invited me to play, because I didn't realize it was different, you could have different disabilities, different conditions. And so I said yes because I was doing that challenge at the time. I thought, well, this is definitely something new. This will definitely be out of my comfort zone. And I just went along. It was like an open day because they were starting in Victoria. They were starting the first ever wheelchair football league in Victoria. And so I just went along for the come and try. And I had so much fun, but we always laugh because I was terrible. And especially when I'm doing something new, because it's a lot, I usually get a lot more spasms. So I was trying to push the chair, and I always joke that like you're meant to go in and out the cones, but I was running over them. However, it was such a supportive environment. I actually didn't, for the first time, I didn't feel self-conscious about my movements because I was around different people with different disabilities. And the first time it was like, oh, it's okay for me to jerk and spasm. And then after that, I got invited back to play to my surprise. And yeah, basically that was my introduction into wheelchair football. Started playing, and then from there, that was where my love for like para sports just grew.
It's a bit of a rough and tumble game, isn't it? I mean, even if you
Yes.
even if it's wheelchair, have you had any injuries from it?
I have had a concussion.
Oh no. That's just what
And
you don't need.
I know. To be honest, it's funny. It was yeah, that because we always joke off course. The people used to say, "Oh, don't be fooled." They'll be like, "Oh, she's all smiley and lovely off court," but I'm very much when I'm in the game, I will very much had that mentality. I was like, "I'll go down with this ball." Like it brought out such a different side of my personality, which I love.
Uh-huh.
And it was just a lot more of that fiery side, that determined side. And yeah, so I was going in, but everyone's always really supportive. So even though you might be playing against someone, no one goes with intent to hurt someone. And so, if there's something that's everyone's always really supportive and making sure that everyone's okay. So it was a great environment. So apart from that one time, which was probably that was my own fault, just going in too hard. Yeah, it's brought a lot of fun memories.
Hmm. And how did you get involved in motivational speaking?
Through the sport as well,
Ah,
actually, because I started to play, and when I got selected to play, I realised that this is an opportunity, and I didn't want to take it for granted. So I decided to start practicing. I rented my own wheelchair, sports chair, and then I remember I was practicing across the street in this outdoor court, and so I practiced and practiced, and over time I started to get quite good, and then from that came different opportunities. So then I remember having a friend who worked for DSR, and his name was Richard, and he asked me, "Oh, there's an opportunity to do a talk at the ATO, and it was a women's networking event. Would you be interested in speaking and sharing your story?" And it was a similar thing with the reason of me getting into sport. I wanted to push myself out my comfort zone and do things that I would have typically said no to, because public speaking for me, I remember doing talks at school and I used to break down and cry because it felt like so vulnerable, because I knew in those situations my spasms and jerks are 10 times worse, and it can be quite exhausting because I've got my muscles, I'm trying to speak, and I used to be very insecure about other people seeing me spasm. And when this opportunity came up, I thought this is a great way to really shift shift that mindset around how I view myself being seen in public, and a great opportunity to share. And so when I went to the ATO, I shared my story and I was absolutely petrified. I remember before thinking, why did I say yes to this? And then I got up and spoke, and yeah, it was really amazing. I just shared a bit of myself, my experience, my story, and after it, everyone was so lovely. They were so just such a beautiful audience. And what I loved about it is after I shared, what I love is the part after is people coming and sharing with you.
hmm.
And it was really beautiful. So it just opened up these conversations. And then from that, I met a lady called Moira Kelly, and then I started volunteering with Moira within her organisation, the Creating Hope Foundation. And then Moira also referred me to places for talks because she was so lovely. She was like, I think you've got a great story, especially for young girls, with
Hmm.
that self-acceptance and that confidence piece. And so, yeah, it just kind of snowballed from there. So really, it was just saying yes to those opportunities that came through, and it just kept opening different doors.
Wow. And do you have a message for other young people with dystonia? I know you'll be dealing with a lot of different people, but do you have any
Yeah.
message?
Yeah, I think, and I know everyone has a different journey. And one thing for me, I know it's different from person to person with dystonia. So for me, I've had a lot longer to get used to living with it because I was born with it and I'm 32 now. But I realized when I was younger, I used to think it was me against my body. And I just had I had so much shame and guilt attached to my body. And I really struggled a lot, and I realized the turning point was like I can't be against myself. And don't get me wrong, like it comes with its challenges and it's not always easy, but I realized that I have to be on my own side. Like my body, even though it's going through its challenges, it's always doing the best it can. And so when I started, I think it's like being able to show myself a bit more compassion and not being ashamed of however my body shows up, and being able to work with my body in every single situation and how it presents. So that's even on my worst days, not going into that self-attack mode, which I
Hmm.
used to do, or, when I'm in public, even if, sometimes I've had people looking, realizing it's just not making that mean something bad about me. And so I think it's realizing having your own back, and it's really important just the way you view yourself and the way you talk to yourself. I've realized that that's been a big game changer, because I'm like, whatever I'm saying to my body, we're all one. So just recognizing, just always reframing, because I used to be, if I would get into a spiral of really bad spasms, the old way I used to speak to myself is like, oh, like, why am I like this? I'm so ashamed of myself, it's all my fault. Compared to now, it's just like, all right, that's okay. My body's a little bit stressed today, we need a bit of a rest, and you know, um, just being like, right, I'm doing the best I can, and just having more love, self-acceptance and compassion. And just because your body works differently, like there's like we still get to be out in public and obviously like, you know, jerk and all. So because I know some people can feel quite self-conscious when they're out in public if they're spasming. And I just think it's important, you know, we're here and we should be able to be out in the world and proud of who we are. And I hope other people feel like that because sometimes I'll be out in public drinking coffee from a straw because that's just how I need to drink that day. And you know, there's no need for, I know that I don't need to feel ashamed of myself. I don't need to, I'm not worried about what other people think about me or how I'm being perceived because I'm here for me. And I hope that other people can feel the same about themselves and get to that space because I also know what it's like to not be in that space. So I think that's one thing. Yeah, just to not have that same kind of shame and guilt and feeling like they can't be out in public.
I think you've got a lot to say. So how can people find out more about you?
Yeah. Yeah, I have my Instagram as I'm quite easy to find because there's not many people with Yasmina McGlone as a name. So even on social media, if
Billy Connolly
people
would
were,
have had a field day with that name.
I know. So yeah, on Instagram, I'm quite easy to find, and then from Instagram, I usually share links where I had my blog Living with a Jerk that yeah, where I've shared different stories, different experiences on living with dystonia, and so yeah, I've also got that blog, and yeah, from there, and then often I'll just share anything that I'm doing or different experiences. Yeah, also I'm quite easy to find because of my name.
Well, on behalf of DNA, I'd like to thank Yasmina for a terrific interview. I wish you all the best for the future, and that looks very bright. If anyone would like to know more about Dystonia and Dystonia Network of Australia, log in to www.dystonia.org.au. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Lovely
Oh,
interview.
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.